The following presentation in this video are personal viewpoints of the speaker and do not reflect official policy or views of the Department of Defense or any of the U.S. military services. Shoot, Move, Communicate, where we provide training for military members to be fit for the fight in life, namely be physically, mentally, and spiritually prepared for the violence of combat and for tackling obstacles in everyday life. I'm Chris Reardon, a U.S. Marine, and today we're going to be covering the first of 6 videos regarding the physical and mental stresses of combat that a warrior would likely face as relayed from Lieutenant Colonel Grossman's book, On Combat, of which the content in this video is heavily referred to either through quotes or paraphrases. Now, in particular, today we're going to be covering the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system's response to the intensity of combat. So stick around. Now, the official study of the performance of all U.S. soldiers in World War II, American Soldier, tells of one survey in which a quarter of all U.S. soldiers in World War II admitted that they had lost control of their bladders, with an eighth of them admitting to defecating in their pants. Now, if we look only at the individuals at the tip of the spear and factor out all those who did not experience intense combat, we can estimate safely that approximately 50% of those who did see intense combat admitted that they had wet their pants, and nearly 25% admitted that they had messed themselves. Now, of course, these are the ones who admitted it, so the actual number may be much higher. Have you ever seen a movie that depicted a soldier defecating his pants in combat? Or can you imagine years after combat bouncing your grandchild on your knee when they ask, "Hey Grandpa, hey, what did you do in the war?" Now, the very last thing you're probably going to want to say is, "Well, you know, Grandpa crapped himself." Now, the problem, however, is that years later, when this kid grows up and ends up in combat himself and he has messed his drawers, he's thinking to himself, "Well, hey, what's wrong with me? Hey, this didn't happen to Grandpa, it didn't happen to John Wayne, so therefore I must be a coward." And nothing could be further from the truth. Now, to better understand the mental and physical stresses of the violence of combat that it particularly has on warriors, we must understand that the body's physiological response in regards to sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system. By doing so, warriors can understand that if and when responses such as losing bladder and bowel control happen, it doesn't mean that they are cowards or weak. Furthermore, they and their leaders will be better prepared to understand and live within the realities of their body's natural response, and in particular for this session, the autonomic nervous system, or ANS. Now, the ANS consists of the sympathetic nervous system, SNS, and the parasympathetic nervous system, which is the PNS. Now, the SNS is associated with the fight or flight response and, for example, increases your heart rate, while the PNS is concerned with maintenance and relaxation functions of the body, which includes salivation and digestion, or just increasing your heart rate. Now, when we sleep at night, our PNS processing are predominantly dominant, and essentially your body is performing maintenance functions and you are completely helpless until you wake up and get moving. Now, this is where your body hits a balance between the SNS and PNS processes. Now, essentially, some cells in your body are on the front lines while the others are doing maintenance. In medical terms, this is called homeostasis. That is, of course, until someone threatens to shoot you. Now, your body then goes into total SNS, fight or flight arousal, PNS process such as digestion shut down. Your body is essentially saying, "Hey, we don't need this digestion," so it blows whatever waste you have in order to allow energy to flow to your legs, for example, to charge or run. Salivation shuts down, which results in a dry or cotton mouth. Now, if we can believe the previous surveys results from World War II, then 75% of combat veterans didn't lose control of their bladder or bowel. However, almost all people who experience the intensity and the imminent threat of the combat in terms of their life are going to get stress diarrhea. In fact, elite police SWAT members ensure that they take one last trip to the bathroom for what they call their battle crap. Now, ultimately, the body is trying to ensure energy is not wasted on unnecessary functions at that time so that the individual can store energy and have every chance at survival. Now that we've talked about the SNS processes, let's talk about the PNS processes a bit. Now, during the Korean War, a team of psychiatrists accompanied a unit of soldiers into combat. Now, the unit had been able to sleep the night before, and they launched an assault the next morning. By lunchtime, the unit secured an enemy position at the top of a hill, and so the immediate danger was over. However, while the soldiers waited for the probable counterattack, the medical team was shocked as they saw that the soldiers were actually falling asleep and the leaders of the units had to move from fighting hole to fighting hole in order to wake up the soldiers. The parasympathetic backlash after the assault was so great that the soldiers were falling into an exhausted sleep even though that they had slept the night before and would soon probably be attacked. Napoleon, the great infamous military genius, once said that the moment of greatest vulnerability is the instant immediately after victory. Now, because of this physiological reality, successful military units throughout history have held back a reserve force so they could rotate it in when the main effort assault force was suffering from the burden of exhaustion. This way, the unit didn't collapse when a fresh enemy unit attacked. Now, leaders can keep their units alert by applying SOPs such as LACE, which stands for Liquids, Ammunition, Casualties, and Equipment. Units can establish 360-degree security, prepare defensive positions, draw fire plan sketches, and coordinate resupply. Rehearsing these actions in training will ensure that this is muscle memory in combat so that warriors can stay alive and thrive on the battlefield. Now, another effect of the PNS backlash is that of the adrenaline flowing through your body right after the heat of battle or otherwise intense confrontation initiated by the SNS processes of your body. A former Vietnam military policeman tells of a story when he was assigned to go on a raid of several Vietnamese shops for stolen American merchandise. The owners of these first two shops resisted and had to be wrestled to the floor so that the goods could be recovered. However, at the third shop, things turned south when South Vietnamese soldiers arrived with M16s, came to the merchant's aid, and before the incident ended, there was about 25 military policemen there, 30 or 40 really angry Vietnamese. Shots were fired in the air, hot words were exchanged, and several fistfights occurred. Now, the MP unit was very close to shooting a couple of Vietnamese before order was restored. The soldier recalled that 2 hours later, while he was at a chow, he was still so wired from the adrenaline, which hadn't fully burned off, that he had trouble really eating with a fork. He couldn't even pick up the food with the fork. When he finally did spear a piece of food, his hand would shake so hard that the food would just fly off. He finally gave up eating with a fork and just started eating with his hands. If you have ever gone to bed with the sense of arousal and that your mind is just going 100 miles an hour, your heart's pounding, and your body rate is just raring to go, you have experienced the effect of what residual adrenaline will do to you. To burn it off, you could do some calisthenics, functional fitness, go for a long run, or just, straight up just pump iron. Now, after this, you could take a shower, hit the rack. Others may prefer to get some on the heavy bags. Either way, these techniques will allow for that residual adrenaline dump to go ahead and burn off. And this way, you can get some well-needed rest. Now, in the immediate days after a combat situation, a warrior could actually be very confused, deprived of sleep, and physiologically out of balance, which may lead to him responding with either too little or too much force in a follow-on combat situation. Now, ideally, if this warrior could get some time off after returning back to friendly lines, this is going to allow for recuperation before being put back into another stressful event. If not given this time, the warrior is vulnerable to severe mental damage as a result of stress stacked on top of original stress. Now, there may not always be the opportunity to do this, but it is ideal for optimum unit combat readiness in order to do this. Now, in summary, the intensity of combat results in physiological reactions that are imperative for military personnel to understand so they can go ahead and not feel guilty for losing bladder or bowel control or for getting extremely sleepy, having adrenaline dump, shakes after combat event, etc. Furthermore, leaders can take these human factors into consideration when planning military operations. Now, the next video in this series is going to go more into depth, particularly about the importance of sleep, as well as how caffeine and nicotine fare in reality when it comes to staying alert during times of sleep deprivation. So remember, until next time, land of the free because of the brave.